There's your travel.
I do not know.
She is our auditor.
No, it was Peter.
Peter.
He was
Okay, so let's go ahead and call the meeting to order at 1:45.
I don't know.
And would the clerk please read the roll?
Board Member Bennett,
Here.
Board Member Brogy, Board Member Foy, Board Member Long,
Here.
Board Member Morgan,
Here.
Board Member Parks, Board Member Ramirez,
Here.
Board Member Sharkey, Board Member Zaragoza,
Here.
Chair Pollak.
Here. Okay, and Mr. Villegas, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Okay. Item 4 on our agenda is the minutes from our meeting held on March 14.
Move the approval of the minutes.
Second.
A motion, a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Minutes are approved. Item 5 is our agenda review. Any changes to the agenda? Okay. Item 6, public comment. Do we have any public speaker cards?
None.
Okay, no speakers. 7 is board comments. Anybody have anything to share, Mr. Morgan?
I think Mr. Villegas and I can do this together. You want to come up, Mr. Villegas, about our little meeting and, or we do it later? Which one?
There's an item on the base white.
Okay, we'll do it then. We'll do our comments about Santa Barbara.
Oh, okay, great. Anyone else? All right, so item 8 is our consent agenda, and we did not pull any items, and there's just items 9 and 10. A motion will be in order to approve those. Motion by Mr. Ramirez, seconded by
Second. Oh, I'm sorry.
Mr. Morgan. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Consent calendar is approved. Now we're on item 11 on our regular agenda, which is a public hearing regarding the adoption of proposed amendments to Rule 42 permit fees. To find that the adoption of proposed amendments is exempt from CEQA and direct the Air Pollution Control Officer to file the CEQA notice of exemption pursuant to CEQA guidelines, section 15062. Mr. Villegas.
Chair Pollak, members of the board, Mike Villegas, Air Pollution Control Officer. Good afternoon. Different one? There we go. This first slide shows an excerpt from Health and Safety Code. It basically says districts have authority to adopt fees to cover our programs related to permitted facilities. And this next slide shows the language that generally accompanies new legislation and mandates from the state legislature. Basically what it says is we're not going to provide fundings to the districts because they have the authority to level fees. The covered programs include obviously permitting and source testing, and there we have a picture of a sampling port from an intake line of landfill gas headed to a flare. And of course, inspections and enforcement, and you have some of our staff out at a landfill gas recovery well. And then our planning work related to stationary sources, which would be the control measures that are included in the plan. In addition, the emission inventory, which is the stationary sources report their actual emissions that we include in the plan. Of course, rule development in Ventura County, it's almost exclusively for stationary sources, and then of course, overhead. We're doing just about everything we can to reduce our expenditures. We've done an excellent job, I believe, in reducing staff over time. But we're trying to do it in a very controlled manner because right now, as the retirement wave is just starting to hit the district, as we're bringing on these new air quality specialists and engineers, they're the bridge to the new district, because they're the ones that, when the wave passes, they're the ones that are going to they're going to have 5 years experience, and they're going to be the leaders, and they're going to be the go-to people in the district. So it's vital that we keep them on staff. The new building will save us a significant amount of money once we get moved into it, and we're already seeing the rent revenue help us on the revenue side for the budget. As always, we scrutinize all our costs in service and supplies, and I think this is just the perfect example is we basically keep our computers and our monitoring equipment running for their full useful lives. In summary, it's a modest 2.5% fee increase. The CPI during the same time frame was 2.1%, although I'm seeing it starting to climb now the past couple months. We had a workshop. We had only 2 attendees. Neither were opposed to the fee increase. They felt it was reasonable. And we had no attendees at the advisory committee meeting regarding the fee issue. For the majority of sources, we have 1,400 on permit, approximately 900 pay the minimum. For those 900, they would see a cost increase of about $14 annually, up to $600. And this increase in revenue would assist us with an additional $60,000 annually in revenue. And I just don't want to get behind the curve on very modest increases, especially with the uncertainty we're seeing with EPA's funding. And more concerning to us is obviously the EPA pass-through grants to us, the states and locals. And I'll let you know we're working very closely both with CAPCOA and NACA, and the red states have their own air pollution control agency association, and actually we're working very well with them. And when you really look at it, some of these states, think about Kentucky, Oklahoma, you know their air districts and their states are not receiving DMV dollars to supplement their work, so they're extremely reliant on the EPA grants. So we have some good allies working in the halls of Congress. That's all I have. I'll be happy to take any questions.
Any questions, Mr. Villegas? Well, it's a public hearing, so let me first open the public hearing. Do we have any speaker cards on this? Okay, I'll close the public hearing. I have a motion to adopt. Is there a second?
I'll second.
A second. Any discussion? All those in favor of adopting, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? It is adopted. We're on to item 12, which is approval of an authorization for the Air Pollution Control Officer to sign a letter of commitment dedicating funding up to $50,000 in FY 2016-17 for the Marine Vessel Speed Reduction Incentive Program in the Channel Islands region. Mr. Villegas.
Yes. As most of the board is aware, large cargo vessels are actually a significant contributor to the NOx emissions in Santa Barbara and Ventura counties. And actually here in Ventura County, those vessels, mostly on their way to the Twin Ports down in Los Angeles, contribute 25% of the total NOx emissions in Ventura County, with NOx being a precursor to ozone. And just to put it in perspective, it's about 2,500 transits each year. The nice thing about this vessel speed reduction is the fact that drag is actually a function of velocity squared on a vessel. So if you make a modest decrease in velocity, the drag decreases significantly, and less drag means less fuel burn during the transit, less fuel burn, less emissions. In 2014, we worked with Santa Barbara and the Environmental Defense Center and the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation with a trial program. It was limited in scope. We contributed $30,000, and it ended up working pretty well. And we ended up receiving a US EPA Clean Air Excellence Award for the program. Last year, we scaled up the program with Santa Barbara, and basically the program in 2016 achieved over 25 tons of NOx reductions during the summer months when we run it, which is smog season. And the other benefit there, that's also the season with some of the whales, especially the endangered blue whale, they frequent the channel then. The next year, for 2017, we'd like to keep the ball rolling. Santa Barbara District is going to contribute $40,000 towards incentive. The Volcano Foundation, which is a foundation from Virginia that's focused on the environment and the arts, and they're going to contribute $20,000. We're also determining there is some leftover funds with the National Marine Sanctuary Foundation from the 2016 program that we'll try to roll over, and then we're proposing to contribute $50,000, although we just received an email right before this meeting that Santa Barbara was dropping their funding from 50 to 40. Our total contribution would be $63,000 because we're going to split the cost of a marine consulting firm that is going to do a lot of the legwork. Basically, this firm is very well known in the shipping industry, and they bring a lot of credibility to the program. They're also the ones that look to qualify the vessels when they apply for it, and then they verify the speed reduction to make sure that the incentive payments meet the terms of the agreement. Lastly, we're working very hard to come up with a sustainable program because we need to do something that's not going to have as large an impact on our mitigation funds. Currently, we're proposing to use Reliant Energy mitigation funds. There's about $109,000 remaining in that account from the energy crisis. So, $63,000 this is the last year we can go at this level using those funds. It's very difficult to find mitigation funds you can utilize for vessel speed reduction just because these aren't motor vehicles. And you can see that a lot of our funding comes from the state with that caveat. So really what we're doing, we're working currently with Congressman Lowenthal's office. And what they found in the exit interviews at the National Marine Sanctuary is that the shipping companies, they were more interested in the recognition. They really liked the EPA grant award, and they're really looking at the positive public relations more than the incentive. So he's going to introduce legislation that would set up a recognition program, kind of something similar. The current tentative name is Blue Skies and Blue Whales, and it would be kind of like the dolphin safe tuna emblem.
And Mr. Chair, I just want to share, when we were in D.C., they were talking about that, and that really is very competitive. Having that logo, it says, that they're very competitive. So it's not really the money anymore. They just want to be competitive, which I think is great.
Yeah, some of the shipping lines really want that label. And certainly the other thing we're going to do is reach out to some of the end users.
That's right.
Obviously, someone like Walmart or Nike, obviously, if they push something like this, it would work very well. So we're just looking for a mechanism. And I'm going to be going to D.C. early May. I'm definitely going to try to get into Congressman Knight's office because I think this is something that hopefully we can get bipartisan support for. It is a voluntary program, but this is an incredibly large source of emissions regulated at the international level beyond the reach of U.S. EPA. It's all through the International Maritime Organization. So I think we need to be innovative and try to get these reductions, especially in light of the fact that, what I'm hearing is that EPA may be easing off on some of their emission reduction measures. So we're going to be on our own a little bit for a while here.
Mr. Chair, it was just great going to D.C., to pick up that certificate, that award. It's just got a lot of kudos and between Santa Barbara and Ventura County.
Mr. Ramirez?
Thank you. Do we have? I think it's great. I just wonder, is there a way for anyone to contribute a personal contribution? Is there any fundraising effort that anybody's doing?
We haven't done that yet, but
Someone,
that's something
We'll
we
need
could
to by
discuss.
next year.
Yeah, we need to do it very quick.
And that was part of my question, too. If this gets set up as a national program, is there a mechanism for collecting contributions for this so we can continue for future years?
That's something we definitely can look at. Obviously, in Ventura County, we have the Clean Air Fund housed by the Community Foundation. And I'm sure we could talk to them about having monies deposited specifically for some type of program.
there's an organization called the Cetacean Society, that looks out for whales and dolphins and that sort of thing. So there's a lot of
Yeah.
potential partners there that someone like me and all my friends who, if you haven't seen the blue whales, go see it. It's unbelievable that they actually are an iridescent blue color.
Yes.
And I wonder if you could even say if there's any information about how many whale strikes have happened last year, or I
know,
mean, we
that-
can't say what's been prevented, but what happened.
We really don't have a number on that. Last year, they did provide additional incentives if the ships basically took notes on when they spotted whales and where during their transits. But it's really hard, I think it's very difficult to
Yeah, sure.
ascertain if it was at night, and even if there was a ship strike, I mean, the ship may not ever know.
But Mike, excuse me, Mr. Chair, but there was less strikes according to them, right, because of the
They
amount that
felt
they
it-
counted?
Based on the number, basically the ones that washed up on shore
Yeah.
or they saw. But
Yeah, yeah, okay.
I still think we need things like Don Knotts where they go boom under the water. Everybody leaves, get out of the way, here we come.
This is definitely my favorite program that we fund, and just because it is such a good win-win situation. And it's also such a surprise how much NOx are actually attributed to the ships out in the channel. I don't think a lot of people realize that.
And the other thing is, one of our staff members had a really good thought, and he actually put in an application for California Air Resources Board's supplemental environmental project funds, which is when there's a large notice of violation against, let's say, a manufacturer. Sometimes they parcel that money out, and we received some in the past for our lawnmower buyback program, and this program is now pre-qualified for those funds, so.
And we use basically pollution funds from before where someone had to pay into it. So that's a perfect source.
Yes. And there are some, significant projects in the county that are considering this as mitigation as well.
Awesome.
We discussed this issue up in Santa Barbara, about what to expect on EPA rules and how much funding we're going to be lacking, who knows, in future years, so.
And that's why I felt this program is something we can implement, get a significant NOx reduction, because if there's changes, if EPA doesn't move forward on truck emissions or somehow impacts California's waivers on light-duty vehicles, we're going to have to look at programs we can implement on our own.
We discussed that, though, and recall that 70% of the vehicle trucks are not registered in the state of California.
That's correct, yeah.
Because they get smart. They're out of state and they don't have to meet certain requirements. And if we do get any stronger, our truck sales and things here will go down and we'll suffer in other ways.
All right, any other comments on this item? So a motion would be in order to authorize the letter and the $63,000 associated with it.
So moved.
You have a motion
Yes.
by Mr. Romero, seconded by Mr. Zaragoza. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, it is approved. We're up to item 13 on our agenda, which is adoption of a resolution approving the addition of one new AQ specialist 1/2 position allocation effective April 11 for a fixed 2-year term commencing on the date of hire.
Yes, currently in our compliance division, we have an inspector that is unable to do field inspections due to a workplace injury. And the information we have at this time is that that's going to be the case for at least 6 more months. Based on that, we really need to get out and do these annual inspections. It was an oil field inspector that was injured, and right when that occurred, we realized we were basically a person down, and we looked at some facilities, mostly small oil leases, and we looked at some that had excellent compliance for the past 5 years, and we said, okay, we'll skip these years until we can get someone else trained over to take their place. And as luck would have it, one of those small facilities was Murata Petroleum, who had their conditional use permit appealed in front of the Board of Supervisors. And they, everyone suddenly noticed that, yes, they weren't inspected last year. And I think the public would have felt a lot better, and I know Murata would have felt a lot better had we been out there that year. So this is something I really never want to skip. you know, our permitting and our enforcement, that's the core business of what we do, and we really need to be there for this. So I think this position will help us out in the short term. It's a maximum of 2 years, and we've committed to go back to your board standing committee at the 1-year marker to see if we need to keep the position open for 2 years. And then at the February meeting of the standing committee, they recommended adoption of this proposal to your board.
Yes, Ms.
I'll
Hall?
make the motion.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, the resolution is adopted. Item 14 is receive and file the minutes of the South Central Coast Basin-wide Air Pollution Control Council meeting of November 9, and I believe, Mr. Morgan, you had some comments on that.
Well, just a couple. It's strange, but we have new Board of Supervisors representing Santa Barbara, and new city councilman representing San Luis Obispo. So we've done a few changes, and I get to be chairman again, which I don't always want to do, but you got to be there every time. But it's a good group, and I think that, isn't the gentleman from San Luis Obispo retiring or leaving soon?
Oh, yeah, their air pollution control officer, yes. His contract ends at the end of this year.
Right, and we have, a big conversation was over the sand pollution, basically, off the beach, which I don't think is going to go anywhere, because State Park and that's not going to stop dune buggies and things. And if you say, well, wait a minute, isn't that same kind of stuff coming when dune buggies aren't there? Yes. And aren't all those fields covered with sand? I used to work up there as a federal officer, and those fields are always sand.
Is that Guadalupe?
No, not Guadalupe. It's in
It's
Nipomo.
really Nipomo that's
Nipomo.
really
Nipomo.
impacted. They built some new homes on what they call the Nipomo Mesa.
Yeah.
and-
Okay.
Yeah.
And their
They're
sand
right
blows off
downwind.
naturally. So they wanted to stop everything so it doesn't stir up the sand so it blow. I said, tell you what, don't do anything for a month. Don't allow that or this, and let's see what blows off.
That's good.
If it's the same thing, but they won't do it. So anyway, he'll be gone.
All right, if any further comments on this item, so a motion would be in order to receive and file.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, and that brings us to the end of our agenda. So we are adjourned as a board. We do have a standing committee meeting right after upstairs. Thanks, everyone.
Shall I leave the
Thank
good
you.
one here?
See that?